Some people can walk away from a conversation and forget about it within minutes, but you can't. Hours later, your mind is still replaying the words, the tone, the pauses that everyone else seemed to ignore. You don't just remember what happened. You start asking questions. Why did they say that? What did they really mean? Was there something beneath the surface? Sometimes it feels like your mind refuses to stay on the surface of anything. A simple moment becomes a puzzle. A casual comment becomes a pattern. And the more you think, the deeper the layers seem to go. For a long time, many people assume this means something is wrong with them, that they overthink, analyze too much, take things too seriously. But psychology suggests something very different, because in many cases, this isn't overthinking. It's simply the natural pattern of a mind that is wired to think more deeply than most. And there are certain subtle signs that reveal when someone has this kind of mind. Signs that quietly appear in everyday life, often without the person even realizing it. Here are 10 hidden signs you might be a deep thinker. Here's the strange paradox about deep thinkers. The deeper someone thinks, the more complicated the world begins to feel. Most people move quickly through life's experiences. They react, decide, and move on. But a deep thinker's mind rarely works that way. Instead of accepting the first explanation, their brain keeps searching for deeper structure. Psychologists often link this pattern to something called high need for cognition, a personality trait describing people who genuinely enjoy thinking deeply and analyzing ideas. Neuroscience shows that the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for reasoning and long-term analysis, tends to be highly active in people with this trait. At the same time, another network becomes important, the default mode network. This is the system that activates when the mind turns inward, reflecting, imagining, replaying experiences, and connecting meaning. For deep thinkers, this system rarely stays quiet. Even during simple moments, the mind continues exploring, which is why many deep thinkers spend years believing they are simply overthinking, when in reality, their brain is just built to process the world at a deeper level. Psychology has found that people who naturally think deeply tend to show certain behavioral patterns, not dramatic traits, but subtle signals in the way they observe, feel, and interpret the world around them. These patterns appear in everyday life, in conversations, in quiet moments, and even in the way they experience emotions. Once you start noticing these signs, a surprising picture begins to form. Because deep thinking is not just about intelligence. It's about how the mind engages with reality. Here are 10 signs that often reveal when someone is a deep thinker. Sign 1. You're comfortable with unanswered questions. Most people feel uncomfortable when something has no clear answer. The brain naturally wants closure. Psychologists call this the need for cognitive closure. But deep thinkers often tolerate uncertainty far better. Instead of rushing toward quick answers, they are willing to sit with the question itself. Their mind remains curious rather than anxious. And that curiosity often leads them to deeper understanding. Sin 2. You notice patterns other people miss. Deep thinkers are natural pattern detectors. Where someone else sees a random event, you see a connection, a recurring behavior, a hidden dynamic, a subtle shift in someone's tone. Your brain constantly links new information to previous experiences. This type of thinking involves strong activity in the prefrontal cortex, which helps integrate multiple pieces of information into a larger framework. It's not overanalysis. It's pattern recognition. Sin 3. Small talk drains your energy. You may enjoy people, but surface-level conversations often leave you feeling strangely empty. This isn't arrogance. It's cognitive preference. Research on the Big 5 personality traits shows that people high in openness to experience tend to crave meaningful conversations, discussions about ideas, human behavior, the deeper why behind things. Without that depth, the mind simply loses interest. Sign 4. Your mind rarely goes quiet. Many deep thinkers experience a constant inner dialogue. Your mind replays conversations. It imagines possible future scenarios. It analyzes past events from new perspectives. Neuroscience connects this to the default mode network, which activates during internal reflection. For deep thinkers, this network is often highly active, even during quiet moments. But the next sign reveals something even more surprising. Sign 5. You feel emotions with unusual precision. Deep thinkers don't just feel emotions. They analyze them. Psychologists call this emotional granularity. Instead of simply feeling bad, you may recognize subtle differences: disappointment, regret, nostalgia, or quiet resentment. This emotional precision reflects a brain that constantly seeks meaning inside experiences, which often makes emotional life feel richer, but also heavier. Sin 6. You question your own thinking. One of the most interesting traits of deep thinkers is metacognition. This means thinking about your own thinking. You catch your assumptions. You examine your beliefs. You ask yourself where your ideas came from. From the outside, this can look like self-doubt, but in reality, it's intellectual honesty. Sign 7. You need solitude to think clearly. Deep thinkers often require time alone, not because they dislike people, but because social environments constantly demand attention. When your brain is already processing large amounts of information, this additional cognitive load can become exhausting. Solitude allows the mind to slow down and organize its thoughts. But the next signs reveal an even deeper motivation behind this way of thinking. Sign 8. You constantly ask, why? For a deep thinker, explanations rarely feel complete. When someone tells you what happened, your instinct is to ask, why? Then another question appears, and another. Psychologists describe this as high need for cognition. The brain literally releases dopamine when understanding clicks into place. Insight becomes its own reward. Sign 9, meaning matters more than routine. Deep thinkers often struggle with tasks that feel meaningless. If something has no purpose, motivation fades quickly. This pattern relates to psychologist Viktor Frankl's idea that humans are deeply motivated by the search for meaning. For deep thinkers, that drive becomes especially strong. They don't just want to do things. They want to understand why those things matter. Sin 10. You sense emotional undercurrents others miss. Perhaps the most difficult sign of all. Deep thinkers often notice emotional shifts before anyone speaks about them. A tension in a room, a subtle change in someone's behavior, an unspoken sadness beneath a normal conversation. Your mind naturally scans for underlying dynamics, which can create a strange experience. Sometimes you feel the weight of things others don't even seem to notice. Modern life often rewards speed, quick opinions, fast decisions, immediate reactions. But deep thinkers move through the world differently. Their brains process information more slowly, but also more thoroughly. Studies suggest that people who think deeply often show stronger connectivity between brain regions responsible for reasoning, emotion, and memory. This allows them to integrate experiences more fully. But it also means they carry more complexity in their thoughts, which can sometimes feel overwhelming. From a psychological perspective, deep thinking is not simply a personality trait. It is a cognitive orientation, a pattern in how the brain organizes information, emotion, and meaning. People with this orientation often show strong activity in networks related to reflection, long-term reasoning, and emotional processing. These systems allow them to explore ideas deeply and detect subtle patterns. But they also make the mind more sensitive to complexity. In other words, the same traits that create insight can also create mental fatigue. Understanding this balance is essential. Because deep thinking is not a flaw. It's simply a different way the mind engages with reality. If many of these signs felt familiar, it might mean your mind works a little differently than most. Not better, not worse, just deeper. Deep thinkers often spend years believing their intensity is a weakness, that they analyze too much, feel too much, question too much. But when you understand how your mind works, something changes. Those same traits start to look less like flaws and more like the natural shape of a mind that refuses to stop exploring the deeper layers of life. And in a world that often moves too quickly to notice those layers, that kind of mind quietly matters. How many of these signs felt familiar to you? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the psychology behind how our minds work, don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this.